Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy. This video series is going to cover PDO, which stands for PHP Data Objects. Essentially, in PHP, we may be used to using something like MySQL Connect to connect to a MySQL server, and then subsequently using MySQL Query to send queries, return results using different sort of extensions like MySQL. PHP Data Objects basically allows us to move away from that. And what I mean by that is it provides a generic way to query databases, and you're not tied down to a specific database type or database product. And what we do is when we connect to a database using PDO, we use a specific driver. In this case, I'm going to be demonstrating it with MySQL because that's my database of choice. But this basically means that we can use the exact same set of methods, and these will apply to any database driver that you use. There also are a load of other benefits. One of my sort of picks being security. And basically PDO really not cleverly, I guess, but sensibly, if you like, or the way it's been designed, basically allows you to inject variables into a query that will automatically be sanitized to prevent against SQL injection. The other thing we've got is building up queries and then executing and falling back or rolling back if we have any errors, and we'll be looking at that later on. That's more of the advanced stuff. It's not really something that's absolutely necessary using PDO. The other last benefit, which really just ties in with the way this has been designed, is it is object-oriented programming based. So it does use sort of PHP 5 and onwards OO features, or OO method of programming. So you can tie that into your own applications as you please. So basically that is why we use PDO, some of the benefits of it and what it is, which is more important if you've never come across this before. But what we're going to be doing now is actually looking at how we can connect to a database. Now PDO sounds really boring, but really if you start to use this and you really get to grips with using this in your applications, it's going to save you a lot of time, a real lot of time. It's one of them things that you don't really want to learn, but once you do, trust me, it will just change the way that you write code. So let's take a look at actually connecting to a database. Now I've got a my PHP MyAdmin interface open here, and essentially what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using this data set here to sort of read the data in, write to this database table, and really all sorts. It just gives us something to work with at least, and something not too complicated either. I also have this open, which I'm just going to pull into there. So we're going to be testing everything out in here, and obviously writing our code in here. So the first thing I want to do is focus on connecting, and the new way the new method we use to connect to this. So to use PDO, think from PHP 5.1 and onwards, or 5 and onwards it's included. Actually no, it'd be 5.1 because 5 is the utilizing OOP. 5.1 PDO is automatically included, but you can get an extension for 5 if you don't have it already. So go ahead and Google around for that if you don't already have it installed. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is to connect to our database. I'm going to be creating an array that stores my config data. This is just the way I like to work, and you don't have to do this, but it just gives a better way, of storing everything. And this would probably be in a separate file somewhere. So I'm going to create a config array called a config array, and I'm going to have an element called db, and this is going to equal another array. So I'm going to store a few different bits of data in here. The first one's going to be the host. The second one's going to be the username. So these are all blank at the moment, but I'll go ahead and fill them in just a moment. Then I'm going to have password. And then I'm going to have the database name. So first thing I'll do is just tidy this up a bit. So my host is going to be localhost, almost always is. My username is going to be root, and I don't have a password. I'm working on a local server with just a standard root account with no password specifically set. And the database name, if you didn't already notice, is website. If you come over here, you'll see we've got website just here. So now we've got our config. Let's go ahead and actually look at instantiating the PDO class, creating this PDO, this new instance of PDO, and then passing the parameters in to be utilized by the constructor function. Now, all that sounds a mouthful, but it really isn't that complicated. So I'm going to create a new variable called db, and this is going to be a new PDO. Now, inside of here, we're going to have some data that we need to pass in here. Now, the basic syntax is this. We've got a string just here, and we have MySQL. Now, this is the driver name. So MySQL is the database interface that we're using, or the package that we're using. And this is specified here. If it's another driver, then you'll use it there instead. And now we say host is equal to something. I'll just pop an X there for now. We have a semicolon, and then we have db name equal X. And that's why I've called db name here. I would usually just say db, but it just makes sense to keep the naming convention the same. So now that we've done that, we can go ahead and sort of fill the blanks in. I'm just going to go ahead and append config db and host. So this will now be localhost. So it'll be host equals localhost. Then we have db name, and again I'm going to go ahead and just fill in the blanks. So config db, and db name. Okay, fair enough, but we've passed in this initial string, so all of this is just one long piece of string data, but we don't have a username and password to connect to the database. Well, that comes just after here. We have a username here, and we have a password here. So we've already got our username and password stored in here, so we can go ahead and just replace these in. Config db, not db, username, and then in here, config db password. So we've instantiated the PDO class, we've created an object which we've now referenced as db, so we can use db to do querying, we can bind values if we're using the advantage I just spoke about of sort of injecting values into queries. And then we can sort of execute a query and loop through an associative array of data. So it's all the same as you'd usually do, but we're using a standardized set of methods which allow us to switch across different databases, and this is really brilliant. And it's also real fun to sort of go through everything and loop through everything in a whole different way, and you'll see how it's going to make everything a lot easier in the long run. So we've created our config set, we've connected to our database. Let's go ahead and actually see if we get any errors. So I'm refreshing and we have no errors, so I can assume we've connected properly. To test this, I'll just sort of get rid of the L off of MySQL and refresh, and you can see here that we've got an error, which is, obvious. And it says here could not find driver. So we obviously couldn't find a driver for MySQ. That's because it doesn't exist. So when we refresh, we are good to go. So that is essentially an overview of PDO, what we can do with it, some of the advantages, and how we can connect. You can already see how it starts to standardize everything, so you can sort of tell it's going to be a lot better to work with in the long run. In the next video, we're going to look at actually querying, so something useful, and then we're going to continue from there, looping through results, counting rows, returning errors in a more object-oriented way, So that's what we're going to look at. So in the next part, we're going to carry on and look at querying our database.